How do you see your life? Are you seeing it as living in a battlefield or a playground? I really did see that my life was a battlefield.
Hello, spiritual friends, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Life Ascended. I have a very special guest here with me today. This is John Hatanaka, and he is fresh from his yoga teacher training after just having assisted at a retreat in Bali, Indonesia. And he returned to Sedona to reconnect with me to discuss how things are changing in this time of flow, which of course is becoming more and more important. He is an accomplished musician, a Reiki master, and meditation facilitator who has been studying Ascension topics for many years. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Cynthia. Yeah, it's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, and John and I have known each other for quite a long time. And I actually feel like we've had a past life as siblings. So that's the energy that I get from you.
Same through
So
the years.
yeah, so we're going to talk. I hope you guys are excited about today's talk because it's one that I feel is really important. I feel like we take life way too seriously, and trust me, who is the most guilty of this? I can raise my hand and honestly say that's been a problem for me.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about childlike energy and how to be more playful. And what came up just very recently was this concept of life as a playground rather than a battlefield. So what inspired you to embrace this concept?
So yesterday evening, I arrived in Sedona and my coach, my teacher, held a Zoom meeting. I'm in this program that's focusing on abundance, and she brought in this concept of how do you see your life? Are you seeing it as living in a battlefield or a playground? Her name's Nikki Kapoor, and she's based in Bali, and she just got back there. And I had to be authentic. And although I didn't really admit it, you know, right then, I really did see that my life was a battlefield. I saw, and we have a choice in this matter. We can see, we can choose to see whether it is, however it is how your life shows up. And so I saw that, wow, what if I could see my life as a playground? How would that change things? How would I approach life? And it's been a contemplation ever since. I feel like whenever you arrive in Sedona, you're given medicine, you're given a
Yeah.
blessing, and
Yeah.
I thought it was very timely that that came in, and contemplating it now, in fact.
Yes, well, it's a good thing to contemplate. Especially like when I think of battlegrounds and battlefields, um, I think that people are stuck in that mentality because it's pushed in literally every news media, and just the languaging when you say is like that, like there's the war on drugs, the war on terrorism, everything is a war. So it's programs us to think in terms of a battle, like I feel like that is just the natural programming that we're given. So do you think that that is what keeps people stuck in that mentality, or do you think there are other things that might keep people stuck?
I think we're all stuck in programming, in and until we become conscious of this, we keep it going. And so in a lot of way, there's an innocence involved. Like there's no reason to blame anybody because we're all innocent. We're all kind of following what uh, we've been grown up to do. I mean, for instance, we're taught from a very early age how to perform, how to be. Even the school system comes from a place of discipline and proponents that very much keep the idea of a kind of battle going. You know, you're given tests, you're given different trainings. It's kind of like going to military training in a lot of ways. And
yeah, for sure.
we get into this life and kind of the job vocation these days, blue collar follows a very much kind of battlefield environment. It's considered to be like a dog eat world. There's so much competition, especially in a place like the US. I think if we get out of the US, and I don't have a perspective of that because I have grown up here in the US, but if you get out of the US, that perspective does change somewhat.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how would you define being childlike, and why do you think it's so important?
I think there's a difference, first of all, between childlike and childish. So Dolly Parton has a famous quote, be childlike, not childish. And I've known that quote for many years.
I like that one.
I think actually thinking, contemplating what it is to be childlike is a pretty significant and hard contemplation. It's something that takes awareness to really like, okay, what is it to be childlike? And I think there's an innocence about it. It's tapping into what you were like at 3 years old. It's realizing that you didn't have a filter, that you could stand up and be your true authentic self. So I think ways to tap into that is just to be silly and to really connect with nature and consider the magical world that we live in.
Yeah. When I think of childlike, I think of the tarot card, the Dreamer, like the Fool, the very first card in the major arcana. You have this young, usually a young person who is going off onto this new adventure, and with their dog usually, and it's to be childlike is to be open to change, to be open to the unknown, to be ready for anything that the universe wants to bring to you. That's kind of how I see it. And it's such a refreshing way to look at the world, I think, because one of the 7 aspects of ascension is actually being open to change. And if we're not open to change, we tend to get more rigid. Obviously, what's the opposite of change? It's being stuck. It's being rigid. It's being, this is the only way to do something or see something. In fact, John and I were just talking about this earlier, how, if you're not willing to look at a different perspective, you essentially are not learning. You're not going to grow. You're not going to evolve, because it's like, well, if you already know everything, how can you learn? Right? So, but really, what do we know? I mean, yeah, we think we know stuff, and yeah, maybe we do, but I think there's a lot more to life than what we actually know. And I'm the first one to admit that I don't know everything.
I think, and this is another point from, so I get a lot of teachings from this teacher coach of mine, Nikki, and she again says, like, start your day with an empty cup. Make sure you start your day with the complete fact that you don't know anything and that all bets are off and that anything could happen. And I think that allows for creativity. It allows for spontaneous occurrences, and it allows for flow.
Yeah, that brings in a great point, because a lot of people are really like rigid in their scheduling. They think, okay, from 9 to 10, I'm doing this. From 10 to 11, I'm doing this. From 11 to 12, I'm doing this. And it's very regimented. And it's like, how can the universe give you something spontaneous, as you put it, if we're so stuck in our schedules, you know? And I mean, I'm all about schedules. Trust me, I live my whole life on schedules. But I also know that sometimes it's good for me to block off time on my schedule and just go, I think I'm going to need to be open during this time. And I don't know why. Like, I have this intuitive kind of hit, like, I need to keep this space open. So I think that's actually a really good activity for people to look at their schedule and maybe see where can you allow for the universe to bring you something beautiful and magical and spontaneous.
What comes to mind for me is what gets you in trouble is logical thinking. And
Mhm.
and the reason that I just wrote about this, the reason that we get in trouble with logical thinking is then on a long time period scale, we realize you can live in a whole town, a whole place for your whole life, but you know,
Mhm.
exploring the world is a great way to have expansion. I think it's one of the easiest ways to delve into spirituality, a
For
very
sure.
physical way to do it, where you don't necessarily
Mhm.
need to meditate. But I think the definition of spirituality is expansion. And so having logical thinking gets you in trouble. And so when you can get out of logical thinking, you can start to consider moving and being based on feeling.
Mm.
And I think this is a hidden gift to things like a meditative practice. Doing different types of meditation, Vipassana, sitting there is your intuition based on feeling increases.
Mhm. That's a good point. Because yeah, if we're too stuck in our what they refer to as the monkey mind,
Hmm.
if we're stuck in that monkey mind all the time, then we're really kind of missing that connection to our childlike possibilities.
True.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's our intuitive mind, right? Because the child and being childlike is actually very intuitive. You look at how children play, and they're not thinking about what they're doing. They're just going off and they're doing it, their imagination is huge and I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I used to entertain myself all day long. My mom said I was really good at playing by myself. I don't know if you did that, but I would create these whole worlds with like my Barbie dolls
Mhm.
and like I never needed anybody to like come in and tell me, "Oh, you need to figure something out." I'd be like, "Oh no, I'm busy. I'm I'm creating this whole world." So it's like, but we lose track of that, it seems like. And we get
Well,
too serious.
we're constantly wanting more as we grow into adults. We go on a vacation and as a kid, you're happy just being on a beach and building sandcastles. You don't need the beautiful view around you even. It's
Mhm.
being same thing, being locked in a room playing Legos for 5 hours at a time is bliss.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah,
we lose that
exactly.
along the way, and then we need more and more to reach our quote unquote happiness. Like
Mhm.
it's something outside of ourselves. And the the kind of interesting irony of that is we get back from vacation and don't aren't even aware of the fact that we were on vacation.
Oh, I
Maybe
know.
we're preoccupied by our thoughts
Yeah.
and mm, our computers and what's going to
Mhm.
happen in the future.
Yeah, and people get so hung up on like, oh, I have to have my phone. I have to, we're so addicted to our phones, it seems like,
Yeah.
and it's like, can you live for 5 minutes without your phone?
Mhm.
Like, see how long you can go without your phone, and I'm actually like super grateful now for I tenderly call them my slave years. Okay, but I don't mean it in like a bad way. But it's when I used to own a restaurant And this was in southern Utah, and it was, somewhat remote. It was just outside of Zion National Park. And I turned off my TV at that time. And it's because I was working way too many hours. I literally didn't have a single minute to watch TV. And I look back on that now. So I didn't watch TV for 5 years, and that is saying something, because I don't know too many people who can say that they did that. But I was completely unplugged by that point, and I just was working in my business. So every day it was all about serving customers, making the food, serving the food. I mean, that was my whole life for 7 years. And so, yeah, I affectionately call them the slave years. But at the same time, it was such a great way for me to be fully immersed in an activity. And I think that if we're so dialed in constantly to the technology that we're tied to, that can actually make us slaves, in my opinion. So if you want to really free yourself, it's like, well, what are you what are you addicted to? Right. So, and I feel like people have a lot of different addictions. Like technology is just like our phones is just one thing, but there's a lot of other things too. But if you're a child and you get connected back to that childlike energy, what are kids really addicted to? They're addicted to sunshine. They're addicted to, you know what I mean? Like they're just so much more in touch with nature.
But I think these addictions stem from deeper foundations of lacking self-love. So we blame the actual surface thing, like using a phone too much or these other addictions, but really they're, and I've noticed this within myself, is there's empty pieces there of not receiving love early on as a childhood in the way that you would like to, or there's always a deeper reason why something is happening. I mean, at you can kind of battle yourself all day with
You
with
can.
kind of being your own critic and being like, why am I on here? I should be on here less. But there is a deeper reason of why that is sustaining itself. We almost get into the topic of somatic healing, where an outward pain, like a pain in the chest or the arm, because I'm a body worker as well, massage therapist. And if the lower back hurts, is there a deeper reason of why that exists? Does it have to do with a lack of feeling of support in your life, or a specific memory, or um, just having a deeper reason of why that pain exists? So just kind of comparing that to our addictions.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they are a subconscious, unconscious cover up for something deeper, and to be more compassionate, kind with yourself when dealing with these things.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a process. I mean, everything's a process, right? But working on loving yourself is a big one, because I feel like people really struggle with that. And that's probably the number one life lesson that I actually see in the fingerprints is feelings of self-worth that are askew. So, yeah, so let's talk a little bit about maybe somebody who is feeling a little stuck or overwhelmed, or they recognize that they're not reaching their full potential, right? Like we all get stuck, okay? This is not this is just part of being human. But what is a way that we could start to play more and turn things around?
As was brought up last night during the Zoom meeting, going out into nature, uh, and being silly with nature. When I was a kid, my parents would take me up the pass to this place called the fairy forest. It was
Oh,
believed
fun.
that there was fairies up there. And
There probably
now
were.
that I am that I have not revised my belief. I believe that there's definitely fairies up there, and
Yeah.
never losing that sense of your childlike nature. I mean, Miyazaki Hayao, one of the famous Japanese producers, each one of his films is based off of a childlike learning, and Totoro is, I believe, the theme is be like a child, live like a
Mhm.
child. And if you watch the cinematography, it's very, there's Totoro, which is no, even in Japan, they don't know what Totoro is. It's this made up little ball of cute energy,
That
and
sounds like a fun word.
it's by watching that film, you're opened up to a new perspective of seeing the world, which if you go to Japan, it is one of the best places in the world to be a kid. They
Hmm.
have such a childlike innocence there. And ironically and synchronistically, they are believably leading the world in spirituality right now. They are
Oh,
the
really?
most awakened
Oh, wow.
um, place in the world. They are a lot of disasters that
Mm.
were foreshadowed to happen there
Mhm.
aren't happening to the
Mm.
degree that they're happening because there's such powerful light there that's
Mm.
preventing these happenings.
Oh, that's
And
great.
it's based on their awakening. And I do believe that, and I've witnessed it. It's even if you don't, believe it in the non-physical, just looking at the physical evidence of that happening. The last big disaster, which I was actually in, was the 2011, tsunami. And uh, there was a lot of reason to go into fear, and they did, but that made them stronger. I've noticed a huge spiritual awakening.
Mm. Yeah. Well, definitely the whole world should be feeling the ascension by now. There's so much going on. Oh my gosh, it's happening, people. So if you're wondering about ascension and ascension topics, that's definitely my specialty. So if anyone's interested, just go to ascension17.com/, membership. And I have a brand new free membership called Portals of Abundance. And you're welcome to go in there for a bunch of free trainings, and you can learn more about how you can ascend in your pathway. So, so yeah, so let's talk a little bit about, you know, if people are having, misperceptions about play and adopting a playful approach. Like let's say they're like listening to this and they're like, well, this all sounds well and good, but how can I really do this? So what would be like a nice routine for somebody maybe to adopt, that you would recommend?
I'm my own teacher for this, and this is a big topic that we were discussing with Nikki Kapoor is how do you incorporate play? And it's hard. It's being silly.
Mhm.
It's being silly for no reason, going out and making weird sounds. We bring such seriousness to meditation. There's
That's
this
true.
very famous part in the book Something Brilliant by Larry Brilliant, where Larry goes over and he's meditating in India with um, the guru over there, the Maharishi, and he's meditating, Babaji, that was his name. And he's meditating, and the whole time he's meditating, he's trying to focus, and Babaji is throwing apples at his crotch. The whole time.
Oh, that's
It's like
hilarious.
he's trying to, and the whole time, his Babaji's like, move, it's like, you know,
You piss me off.
it's just like, oh, you're not. So we take such a serious approach to
Mhm.
meditation. We take such a serious approach to things when everything is playful. The divine is playful. How can it
Hmm.
not be with what's happening in the world? It's mischievous. Look at the our creation, you know, and just how the different ways that we act, you know, when even we could go into like the very foundations of how we arrive on Earth and the process to get there. It's comedic. It's so comedic.
It, funny. I
Like we
think
have a
about
waste
it.
system right next to a creation system, like 2 inches from it. I mean,
It's
you know,
true.
divine has a sense of humor. Let's just admit
Yeah,
that.
yes, for sure.
I
That's
think
hilarious.
there's a few comedians that have
Oh my
spoken about that, you know.
God. That's definitely true. I've heard that.
No,
So,
and it's silly.
yeah.
It's so silly.
Yeah. So another thing I would recommend, so you mentioned the like the concept of nature and getting in touch with nature, you know, go out and actually communicate with your tree or with your flowers or your cactus or, you know, whatever it is. Because nature does listen and everything has consciousness. So you might just find that things get opened up for you when you do that. I still remember when I was a kid, I used to make mud pies. Like, did
Mm.
you ever do that?
I loved I loved being at the beach and making big sculptures and taking the sand and then letting it drip and it made,
Yeah.
you know, places like Moab have that really cool rock structure and you're almost recreating that, you know,
Uh-huh.
as a little kid on the beach and you're like, that's how it was made.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we take for granted how
Yeah.
things are actually formed. We actually don't
Mhm.
know.
You're right.
I was just in a big discussion about, we were looking around at Sedona and you know, maybe we all think, oh, it's geological updrifts, but maybe it's space poop, you know? Maybe it's
That's
space,
true.
it's like magical space poop from universal gods, you know? They're
Maybe
just
the ETs just put it there, you
yeah.
know, they're like, oh, let's create a vortex here. And oh, well, they're going to want some pretty rocks. Let's put those there.
I think we're too sure about a lot of things. We're too sure.
Yes. So this is a good reminder just for everybody. If you want to be more childlike and more playful and opening up to the wonders of the universe, just go, you know, maybe just ask the question of what if that were not true? Or what if something else were true? You know, and maybe just asking the universe, like, hey, what else is possible? You know, and that can really open the door of like, yeah, maybe there's more to the story.
Or simply just by being spontaneous. Like go I have received so many blessings in life off of doing things with that spontaneous intention. Like going out there and being like, I don't even know whether to turn left or right. I mean, turning left that day, what, 5 years ago was the thing that eventually let me live in Sedona for a year. And
Yeah.
it was a complete spontaneous decision. So
Hmm.
be
Amazing.
childlike. Go out of your house today and walk in a straight line and say, I'm not allowed to deviate from a straight line for an hour. And see what adventure that brings you on. You know, see what mountain it gets you on, see what animals you come in contact when you
Mhm.
go on that adventure. I and it'll bring you joy. It'll bring
Mhm.
you, and this is, I'm a teacher for myself. I need to do more of this too, for sure. I think I do struggle with being childlike and tapping into those days when I was 3. I think we're taught to grow up too fast.
For sure. I think that's a big one for kids. Yeah, I was taught to grow up really fast because I was 6 years behind my next older brother and I was the youngest. So I coming straight out of the gate, it was like, you're too little, you're too young, you're too small. You need to, you know, figure it out. You know, why can't you do that? It's like, well, I'm 3, you know, and my brother was 9, you
Mhm.
know, so that's a big age gap. So yeah, that was always, and maybe that's why I like to play by myself because I just didn't, you know,
Yeah.
I didn't have I didn't have to worry about anyone judging me, or you know what I mean? Because yeah, there's a lot of judgment, I think, among siblings, and just expectations of like, this is how, we want you to grow up and be successful. And it's like, well, what does that even mean?
Successful.
Yeah, like,
I was even going into with this conversation, Nyla, just earlier today. We were going into like the meaning of the English words. Like when you break intention down, you have tension inside of it.
uh-huh.
You have the word tension, like you're just tensioned, you're tense to begin with. Like how can you even set this boundary like I have an intention, like you're already stressed. How is that even going to manifest? Tension, So much of our word inside of our words is these very stressful things, like intention, you're in tension. Like in relaxation. Let's create in relaxation and call it intention.
Okay, that sounds interesting. That's definitely more playful.
So many things we affirm without realizing that we are affirming it.
That's
Another
true.
word that you could break down is Sadhguru goes into this, the meaning of responsibility. If you break that down, ability to respond, it comes from such this stressful. You have a responsibility to save the world, and people go no. And when you break that down, it's the ability to respond. It doesn't mean you have to do anything, but you have the ability to respond.
Yeah.
If you see it that way, it creates this gentleness, and then it creates a willingness. And yes, I do have a responsibility to save the world. I have the ability to respond, to help save this world. And by bringing out that positive feeling, you're not actually doing that, but you're bringing in a positive affirmation. Yes, which changes the dynamic and creates movement by itself.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you find yourself picking up trash.
There you go. All right. Well, this has been so fun, John. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yes. Thank you
so please tell us a little bit about how can people work with you? How can people reach you if they want to know more?
Okay. Well, I'm stepping into a new space, more of an old space. I am a Reiki master. So eventually I will initiate other people interested in this path. I have an amazing teacher. So you can contact me there and get information about doing Reiki. I can do in-person sessions. I also facilitate meditation, and I also lead songwriting workshops that help people deal with trauma. Because by taking a hard experience and turning it into art, we can, as I've learned being a songwriter, we can help soften life experiences and turn it into something creative, be more childlike.
Yes, art is definitely creative and childlike. So that's great.
So my email is below this, and you can also reach out to me on Sound in the Messenger, my Instagram, and TikTok.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for tuning in. And as always, I am interested in hearing what you want us to talk about on this show. How can we make this show the perfect spiritual ascension show for you? Please let us know in the comments, and we would appreciate you following and liking to spread the word. And let's all ascend together. Okay, everybody, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on Life Ascended, where you can discover your divine potential every day. Please show your support by tuning in, following, sharing your comments, and inviting others to listen. Take it further by visiting Ascension17.com for deeper spiritual growth, guidance, programs, and products.